Good morning. It is so good to see all of you this morning. It has been a long couple weeks here. We've had VBS, we had Mattawa, but all of our teams are back now. All of our volunteers are back, and we are so grateful because the people who have helped out these past few weeks have done above and beyond. They have gone across the state to serve other communities. They have served our children right here. They have supported this church, and we are just blown away by how faithful all of you are. So thank you so much for your support and your prayers and your volunteering over the past couple weeks. It's been a trip. So we are back to kind of our normal schedule, and it's just a great day. It is warm. I will try to get you out of here fast. But here's the thing. As a woman of a certain age, one of my favorite shows growing up was Friends. I feel like I already win. In fact, one of my very favorite episodes is one in which Monica and Rachel lose their apartment to their friends Joey and Chandler. Monica and Rachel have to move out of their big, lovely, clean girl apartment into an apartment that is much smaller and dingier and has been inhabited by two single men for a very long time. As you can imagine, Monica is not happy. And so she spends days trying to make the apartment look better. She cleans and she cleans and she scrubs and she starts cooking food and she's preparing to host people again in her new apartment. And after days of working through the night, finally she's ready. She's made all the food, it's laid out, everything's clean. She walks over to the other apartment and she says, come on, and she invites them in. And everyone is amazed at the work she's done, but as they look around, she sits on the couch and she says this, I am always the hostess, as she falls asleep. And after she falls asleep, her friends get back up, they turn around and they walk out. And I can so relate to Monica in this moment, because I actually have house guests right now. In fact, they are here. And one of my best friends and her boyfriend, and they flew in late Friday night. And I know that she loves me. She has seen me at my best and my worst, and she really doesn't care what my house looks like. But for the last week before she got here, I was driving myself crazy trying to clean it and find new throw pillows and refusing to eat in the kitchen I had just cleaned because I didn't want to clean it again. And by Friday night, I was exhausted. And I started to think about how many people in this room, particularly my fellow women, can relate to that feeling. How many of us have worked through Christmases and birthdays and Easters and Thanksgivings and graduation parties, trying to make the day perfect for others, driven by that little voice inside your head that tells you you have to do this so people will think you are a good enough hostess or a good enough mom or a good enough boss or a good enough pastor. And our scripture this morning is about another person, about a person who is preparing for guests as well. This is the word of God this morning. While Jesus and his disciples were traveling, Jesus entered a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him as a guest. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his message. By contrast, Martha was preoccupied with getting everything ready for their meal. And so Martha came to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to prepare the table all by myself? Tell her to help me. The Lord answered, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. One thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part, and it won't be taken away from her. This is the word of God. Poor Martha has gotten a really bad rap over the centuries. And unfortunately, it's often for the wrong reasons. And in a lot of ways, I feel bad for her because I am far more like Martha than I am like Mary most of the time. As a closet introvert, I prefer the kitchen to the living room more often than I want to admit. And as a recovering perfectionist, I often feel the responsibility to make sure that everything is handled and everything is perfect. And I can just imagine poor Martha's reaction that morning when she found out that 13 men were going to be coming into her tiny house that day. You see, hospitality was a way of life in the Middle East, and it comes with certain requirements. And it meant that Martha was expected to provide food and drinks and welcome to the people coming over, to make sure that Jesus and his disciples felt like her home was their home. And I can only imagine the incredible stress she felt when she heard that the teacher was on his way. And she looked around her house and she saw all the little corners that hadn't been dusted and the plates that had been left out from the morning meal and the lack of the prepared bread and food. And I bet she started to make a list in her head of how much time she had. How long would it take to get to the well and go draw more water? And how long would it take to go to the market and get more food? And I bet in that moment she stopped and she paused and she thanked God she had her sister. At least I'm not doing this alone. And so she starts to work, and she continues to work. And even as her guests arrive, she probably did what we do when we're still working in the kitchen and guests arrive, and we're, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Grab a seat in here. I'll be out in a bit. And she runs back. And I can picture her in that kitchen with the fire going and kneading dough and sweat on her brow when she looks up and she realizes all of a sudden that Mary isn't there anymore. And maybe she waited a few minutes thinking that Mary had run to the bathroom or she was getting something for Jesus. But when Mary doesn't come back, she begins to go and look. And I bet she is shocked when she finds her sister sitting at the feet of Jesus, because that is not something that women were invited to do very often. It's the posture of a disciple, learning from a teacher. And so I imagine Martha doing, again, what you and I do when we want to catch someone's attention, but we don't really want to interrupt. We come to the side of the room, we try to make eye contact, kind of move around, maybe like wave, hey. But Mary doesn't see her. Mary doesn't turn around. She is fixed on Jesus. And so I would guess Martha goes back in the kitchen, and maybe you've done this too. People aren't paying attention. She starts moving the pots, banging them around. I wish I had some help in here, clanking things in the most passive-aggressive way possible, letting people know that you are displeased that they are not helping you without having to say anything. But Mary doesn't take the hint. And finally, Martha has had enough, and so she leaves the kitchen and she stalks into the room. She's just trying to do what is expected of her after all. She is trying to make a nice night for Jesus and the disciples. She's trying to be a good hostess, and here is Mary, not even bothering to pull a little of her weight, ignoring her responsibilities and her cultural mandate, piling the chores on poor Martha as usual, while she gets to enjoy Jesus. And doesn't Mary realize how much work there is and how busy they should be? And so when she finally addresses Jesus, it is not with a welcome, but with a complaint. Lord, don't you see how lazy she's being? Don't you see how busy I am? Make her help me. And I would imagine that Martha is expecting Jesus to take her side, because we don't usually march into the middle of a crowd and demand something from someone thinking that we're not going to get it. But she doesn't. And instead, Jesus looks at her and he says gently, but with a little bit of rebuke, you are distracted by so many things, and only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen it. I won't take it from her. And so much of our misreading of this passage comes from this one line, that Mary has chosen the better thing. Because what we end up doing is we read it like Mary choosing to listen to Jesus is superior to Martha choosing to serve Jesus. Or that somehow a life of contemplation is more important than a life of service and providing for others. But that doesn't ring true anywhere else in the Gospel of Luke or in Acts or anything anywhere else that Jesus talks. Because this is the truth that we know, that we need some people in the kitchen. Someone has to make the food. Someone has to set the table. Otherwise, Jesus and the disciples would have gone hungry. So what is the problem that Jesus is pointing out? What is he really revealing to the two women about their choices? And the key to this passage lies in the words worried and distracted. Martha is not wrong because she's choosing to serve Jesus rather than sit and listen. she's wrong because she's missed the entire point of her service and hospitality. Because the point of what she's doing, the point of her service, the point of her hospitality isn't her business. It's not her sense of fairness. It is Jesus. He is supposed to be the reason why she is doing everything, but instead, as you can see, she is so focused on herself. It's about me, and then on her sister, and on her perception of what's fair, and her need to be recognized for all of the hard work that she's doing. And this is something that I struggle with, and I would guess that some of you struggle with as well. That we are too worried and distracted about all of the things that we have going on in life, so much so that we forget who we're supposed to be living that life for. I recently had to go to Presbytery, and when I'm there, I interact with pastors from all over the region. And this is what I've learned. If you get any group of pastors together and you ask them how they're doing, there is a standard answer. And it goes like this: how are you? Oh, I'm busy. Well, how are you? Oh, I am super busy. How are you? Oh, I am crazy busy. And maybe this sounds familiar, and maybe you laugh a little bit uncomfortably because you know that if I were to ask you this morning how you're doing, your answer to me would be, Pastor Brenna, I am so busy. But Brene Brown writes this: we wear our busyness as a badge of honor. And we would be afraid of what people would say if we weren't busy. You see, we are a busy people. We scurry around from task to task, from appointment to appointment, from distraction to distraction, and exhaustion becomes our status symbol, and we are happy to play the comparison game to maintain it. How many times have you had this conversation with someone? I'm not going to ask which side you're on, okay? But maybe you come up and you say, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so tired. I only got like 5 hours of sleep last night. The person in front of me goes, oh, I would kill for 5 hours. I only got 4 hours of sleep last night. Or maybe you're talking to another parent and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired to take my kid to 3 different extracurricular activities after school. And the other parent's like, 3? I've got 2 kids and we had to go to 6. You see, we compete, and we tell ourselves that we're busy doing all these things for Jesus and all these things for everyone else, and we don't stop and ask the question, who are we really doing everything for? Is our work about Jesus, or is it about us? Who and what is at the center of our life? Because Brene Brown goes on to say this, that crazy busy is great armor. And it's a great way for numbing. And what a lot of us do is we stay so busy, so out in front of our life, that the truth of how we're feeling and what we really need cannot catch up with us. Martha does not want to face her need for recognition, or her anxiety, or her perfectionism. Monica doesn't want to deal with the loss of her apartment or the fact that she feels like her identity as hostess has disappeared. I don't want to deal with my fear of people thinking I'm not enough or I don't have it all together, and so we stay busy, crazy busy. Anything and everything to avoid sitting at the feet of Jesus and having to deal with that yawning black hole of vulnerability we want to avoid. And we say we're doing it for Jesus, and we're doing it for others, and we're doing it because we have to do it. But try this mental exercise. Take a moment with me and think about this. What if the next time someone asked you how you were doing, your answer wasn't busy? What if instead this is what you had to tell somebody? I'm good. Life is balanced. I have a reasonable amount of work and chores, but I'm able to take time to enjoy the day, focus on God, see my kids, take a short nap. I feel good. Yeah. I don't feel like me. My stomach already feels anxious. I feel uncomfortable, and I feel nervous, terrified, because what would people think if I told them that? Would they think I was lazy? Would they think I was slacking off? Would they wonder what the heck they were paying me for? And if you manage people, right? If your job on a day-to-day basis is managing people, how would you react if one of your employees in your next one-on-one came to you and you asked, how are you doing? And they said, I'm good. I can finish all of my work without stressing out in a reasonable time frame. I have an excellent work-life balance. I get home on time to have dinner with my family, see my kids. I'm not checking my email on vacation every time. Or if you're a parent, what if you were asking your kid how they were and they said, I'm doing great. I've had time to finish my homework, hang out with my friends, and now I'm just gonna watch a movie for a while. Makes us uncomfortable, doesn't it? Makes us want to say, but that's being lazy. They have so much more they could fit in. But as Christians, we are called to live lives that are differentiated from the rest of this world. And what Jesus is admonishing you and I and Martha about is that busy is not the goal of our life. In fact, all busy is another word for distracted and not focused on Jesus. And how you manage your employees, how you manage your family, how you manage yourself, it matters. And you have to ask yourself, do I worship at the altar of Jesus, or do I worship at the altar of busyness? Do I, or would I, like Martha, end up complaining to Jesus when you see others who dare rest in his presence, enjoy his presence, and make him the center of their lives? Do you get jealous of it? If only I could do that. Busy eats away at us a little at a time, and we keep numbing and we keep moving with it so we don't have to face hard truth in our lives and the insecurities and the anxieties and the fear that we all run from. And we are so afraid that if we stop for just one moment like Mary, if we really paused to listen to what Jesus is telling us about how we use our time and allot our life, that maybe the entire illusion we have of a self-controlled, self-sacrificing, martyr-like life would be shattered. And we would have to face the real reasons about why we do what we do. And the answers might not be as wholesome or as good as we think they are. And we are so skilled at running away. We are so skilled at being busy as a culture these days that there is now an entire new industry dedicated to it called self-care. And the rallying cry of self-care, many of you might know, it goes like this: treat yourself. Yeah. The ultimate in self-care. It's the motto of work hard, play hard. And so self-care is sold as bubble baths and too many glasses of rosé and too many glasses of whiskey and chocolate and ice cream. And self-care is understood to be spa days or extravagant vacations, new shoes, new golf clubs. Basically, it's advertised as self-indulgent behaviors to help you forget or escape how busy you are for just a few minutes. We want to tell Martha, girl, look, you go put on a mud mask, you pour yourself a glass of wine, you turn on the latest episode of Housewives of Jerusalem, and you just zone out. You do you. You take a minute for yourself. You've been working hard. Got all these men in your house. But this isn't self-care. It's an illusion. It is not the kind of self-care that Jesus calls you and I to, because the kind of self-care that Jesus calls you and I to is what Mary is doing. And it is a challenging thing, facing reality and being still and listening. And it is hard. And it is not glamorous. And sometimes it's going to make other people angry. And it's more often about doing less than it is about adding in something to do more. It's a kind of self-care that you and I are called to do in the midst of our busyness might be putting down that drink and instead going to the therapist to deal with the pain we want to avoid. It's not buying the latest thing that strikes your fancy, and instead maybe it's paying down your credit card debt and setting a budget. It's going to the gym or the doctor and not self-medicating with pills or with food. It's spending time with your kids and putting down the screen. It's saying no to a promotion that maybe would take you away from a marriage that's already pretty shaky and needs more of your attention. See, true self-care is not bath bombs and chocolate cake. It is making choices to build a life that you do not regularly need to escape from. You see, the core of this text is not about women. It's not about women's roles. It's not about a contemplative life versus a life of service. It is so much bigger than that, and it is for all of us because it's about being distracted. It's about being so busy working for God that we miss God's presence right in front of us. About keeping ourselves from facing the truth of our motivations by filling our life with so many activities and so many things that we don't have time to stop because then it feels like everything would fall apart. What would have happened if dinner had been 20 minutes late? Or if the table was only set in the most basic form? Would Jesus have left Martha's house? Would he have said, nope, no kingdom for you, I'm out? No, of course not. You see, because Jesus isn't looking for perfection. He's just looking for people who put him at the center of their actions rather than themselves. And we try so hard to make our lives perfect before we invite him in or others in. And we miss so much in the meantime. And we carry around so much resentment and so much jealousy of others who have found that freedom to simply be, to understand that they don't have to perform anything for God. They just have to be present. And we call them lazy. See, but Jesus doesn't see it that way, and so he makes a promise. She has chosen the better part because she has focused on me, and I will not take that from her. If Martha had been doing her service focused on Jesus, that would have been the better part too. But he's not going to take himself from us once we have made that choice, no matter how much the outside world might complain about you. So by focusing on Jesus, we end up choosing what is better. And it guides our choices in our life so that we can say no to the things we need to say no to and say yes to the things we need to say yes for. But more than that, it frees us because it frees us from that internal pressure of feeling like we have to impress everyone and be everything to everyone. And it helps to silence that interior critic that says, you're not good enough, you're not working hard enough, you haven't done enough. Because all of a sudden there's only one person to impress, and that is Jesus. And I'll be honest, he already knows all the terrible things about you. You can't hide it. And he knows all the good things about you, and he has said, you are my friends. You are a part of my family, not because of what you've done, but because I have chosen you. And not only that, if you come to me, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, so put the rest of it aside. You don't need to be perfect for Jesus. You don't need to be perfect for the church. You don't need to be perfect for your families. You just need to be present. And the rest will work itself out in due time. And so I pray for each and every one of us that we would find a way to center on Jesus. Because the freedom that offers from that place when we locate our life there is so much sweeter and so much more expansive than anywhere else. Friends, would you pray with me?